school board, including but not limited to said school board's advance written approval of all plans, specification, contracts, materials, and construction schedules necessary to effect any such future improvement or alteration. Well, on that basis, this evening, we will be getting, I hope, a motion prepared from Peter to specifically identify the items as needed. And if you like to have that in writing so that you don't have to stay under action items, I'd be happy to accept that from you if you prefer. Does anyone have any other questions or comment on the football field? Lloyd?
If he's going to leave, I have one. I see here that you had on your thing there that naming the field.
Yes.
Well, I had spoken to John Morrison. I don't know if you had, anybody had any suggestions.
We have received 2 specific suggestions, and we've also received a suggestion to open up as a type of a contest to improve enthusiasm and support and have students and townspeople make suggestions on what could be a naming of the field.
Well, if I may suggest, I talked to John. And I know the work he's done there. I live right next door, and I watched him day in and day out. I know he put over $200,000 in it. He said to me, I'd like to have it named after my father, and I think we should honor his request. I really do in some way.
That is one of the suggestions that has come before us. And another thing that I mentioned at our meeting was, I'm not sure what is the official procedure to go about naming a facility. I think the last time one might have been named might have been the Nathan Morrison Field when the field hockey field was built back 23 years ago. So I would be looking for some direction at some point on that.
I think we'll explore that further when the time comes. It's an item of interest to a lot of people. Don?
Excuse me. I noticed you didn't have anything in there for being able to view the games.
At the present time, we're not looking at bleachers because of the fact that the Friends of Football are trying to just raise enough money to get things going along. I can include it in the motion. There won't be any bleachers there next year. Many Division VI programs where we are presently start out with, you bring your own chair or you stand. But eventually, there would be.
And there's no hillside to view from?
Not really. We haven't quite decided with the fencing how we're going to deal with the portion up closest near Mr. Belvin's, which comes right down a very steep incline. There'll be a fence of some type there, but that's 400 yards from where people will be entering the field, so we'd be dealing with that. That's one of the reasons we're looking to have a scrimmage and then the first game before we have the official dedication, so again we can see how the flow of the people are and where people go.
Okay. Lloyd?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. Both sides of the field where they drop off with the rocks. Kids, like you say, fooling around there. I don't think we should have any organized games there until we get the fences on those sidelines.
Oh,
I'm not worried about up where my land is. I'm worried about the sidelines dropping
There
off.
won't be, and that's going to be a chain
should
link
be a
in some way,
stipulation
shape, or
because-
manner. There's a student who hopes to become an Eagle Scout by the 27th of August. He's indicated an interest in doing a project up there. He's found some other areas that he needs to complete to satisfy his graduation requirements, so I'm not sure how quickly he is going to move on that, so maybe again something that the Friends of Newfound Football will have to purchase. But no, the fence and the scoreboard are the 2 things that before any games or anything, that'll definitely be taken care of. And I've given the Friends of Newfound Football basically July 1st to guarantee me that everything will be done so that we can indeed play there come August.
Good.
I encourage you all to take a journey up there to check it out. It's pretty impressive, especially if you happen to see it before it was being built. So you've done a great job.
If anybody wants it, I have some pictures of that whole process. I took some pictures as the field before and halfway and grinding rocks. Kept an eye on it, And I may have some here they got through
Because
school.
I have some plans, hopefully, for that opening day of including the game and then possibly a video or maybe a casserole dinner and just sort of have it a community event. That's why we're also tying with the Bristol Old Home Day when we have our initial scrimmage here, again, to build community sports so the people who have contributed in some way, shape, or manner over the last 7 or 8 years have a chance to come up and see what has gone on and what is potential, but I'll make sure I put your name down to get some pictures from you.
Yeah, I couldn't afford it.
Peter, if you have a motion drafted and you care to stay, you're certainly welcome to. It'd be up to you.
Drafted within 10 minutes.
Okay. I'd like to take a brief look at it before you leave,
Okay.
just to be sure in case we have questions. So, are there any other comments or questions for Peter? Okay, thank you very much. That's great progress on that. Really looking forward to the first game in the fall. Next item on the agenda is a response to the student council request brought up by Josh last month regarding a concern over standards-based learning and grading. Would you care to address that, Mike?
Sure.
Directly? Thank you.
As I understood it, although I wasn't here at that meeting, Josh weighed in on some impressions about the future of grading that included information that was not able to be answered to the board about the proposition of ending grading as we know it. And if I'm incorrect about what I didn't hear or see, someone can tune me into that. Also about the processes used to derive the competencies that are required in the state of New Hampshire now.
Mike, the microphone? I'm
He's
wondering-
okay.
Are you good?
Oh,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Project.
Okay. Yeah, so thereafter, we had a conversation that we presented in school to summarize information in direct response to the idea that we would no longer be using standard grading and/or we would no longer be reporting grading to schools of post-secondary nature the way everybody understands we fundamentally do and always have. And then we presented that information and other pieces of information at a public forum that clearly made it obvious, I hope, that the supposition, the fear, the impression that grades were going away was totally not the case at all, that there were no plans to eliminate grades whatsoever. That the style of grading would still be appropriate for transcripts to be delivered and for all of our students to have ample opportunity to gain pathways to higher education without any obstacles whatsoever. And those were the two main ideas that I think were what I heard, propositions for concern that we both wanted to comment about and then bring back formally, I think, because you had thought it was a direct response that you wanted to make.
Josh, do you have any?
Recognized again. Thank you, Mr. Melly. I'm glad to have a little bit of clarification on that one portion of it, but one portion was forgotten. There was one other aspect of the license that I brought up. Midterms and finals.
Yes.
Yeah. We had, and I've spoken with a few staff about this, and they've been able to say, you know, there has been talk of this throughout staff maybe a few meetings, and we're just concerned with college-bound students maybe not being able to, not having the opportunity, rather, to take these exams at a high school level and then not being prepared for them at a college level. And so would it be possible to get maybe a confirmation from you, either yes or no, on the validity of that concept? Whether they would be in effect for the 2013 or 2012-2013 school year.
Yes, they will be.
Okay. That was the other part of the
Right.
council
I
report.
remember that there was some dialogue about the suitability of replicating work over a whole term or semester in an hour-and-a-half exam where competency had already been developed and competency reports had already been provided and grading on the competency had already been established. What could that one exam do to amplify or correct the idea of there was proficiency in learning? that had already been proven with grades and with reports on the competencies themselves over the course of an entire term or a semester. That conversation is going to continue, because with the Common Core that's going to be introduced, the idea of writing about what you have learned, to explain how you learned it, not just reporting what you learned, is going to take a prominent place in accountability systems and in assessments, Josh.
Okay.
So whether or not the format for the exams that we have had and have always had are going to remain the same permanently, forever, I would suspect in a competency-based system, over time they will develop differently. But I also understood that you had a concern about practice for college exams,
Yeah, 'cause that-
coming from the frequency of also being able to do finals in high school.
Because that was our concern with it. I know
Yeah.
last Friday I'd taken the APUS test, and that is or AP United States History is a college dual enrollment-ish class where that is at a college level, and they do have the exams in that nature. And what we had come to the conclusion of is, as students, if you are to change the format of a high school midterm and final, it would be best to do that if a college is to move to that level. If they change the format, then it would be appropriate for it to be changed to the high school level.
Yeah, sometimes the AP test that students take at the high school level is the hardest exam they'll take in the next 4 years, once those scores are looked at to accept them to college. They are not replicated in college.
Because it's really nice to be able to accommodate for students who might not be able to demonstrate proficiency in learning in the format of a written test. But a college is not going to, in 99% of cases, allow the student to say, I don't perform well with exams. They will tell you that you will have to take the exam anyway. And as more and more students are becoming college bound these days, we feel that maybe switching from the written format that they have as a college standard to a more, let's create a new final, would be detrimental to students trying to move on.
Yeah, and that's a point well taken, that everything we do here has to be compatible with how it is that progress is made at the next level. It's all preparatory. And as I said before, the Common Core is going to download the expectation that students in high schools be able to perform at a college level before they leave this level. And the reason for that is that at the college level, the idea of what is tested is about the processes of learning and the ability to use those processes to adapt, to create, to innovate, and to show that type of progress at the college level as well as on jobs. And so like we prepare students for college, and for that work, colleges prepare students for the adult world and the life of work with those ideas and concepts and capabilities.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Okay, just was asking for clarification on that, because we didn't want to take one word over the other, and figured in a format such as this, we'd be able to maybe come to a clearer consensus.
I get that.
Okay.
And of course, you can always walk in like you do and ask questions about it, because that's,
Yeah, just,
that's a good
this
place
is more of a
to have it.
clarification.
yeah.
Yeah.
All that we do and all that we change is going to be very public, very transparent, and very much based on a system that everybody knows about and can support.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other comments on this topic? Joss, is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up. We
Not a
want to
problem.
foster communications between all parties. Mike, thank you for
You're very
attending
welcome.
and giving that explanation.
Sure.
Appreciate it. This is showing for action under action items, but it's unlikely that we will take any, so FYI. Next item on the agenda is item C, discussion regarding school board elections. If I can provide you with information that was graciously collected and provided by Mr. Belbin. If you could take one of those each and pass them on. I forwarded to you this evening, upon receipt of comments from Attorney Barrett Christina of the the New Hampshire School Board Association, his background regarding the cooperative school district and the detail on this. Hopefully you may have seen that email. If not, I apologize for the lateness of the response, but I did follow up with him. He did get it to me prior to the meeting. So you may recall that this issue came about as a result of public comment last month from Bob Brooks of Hebron. He's here with us this evening, and I invite you to have a discussion with us this evening, Bob, on the topic. I will just give some additional background on this and see if there's any action that the board wants to take under action items. Briefly, Mr. Lito suggested at the time that we follow up with you. I expressed an intent, after you had left the meeting, I believe it was, that I intended to get in touch with you to explain what I knew about the subject. And you and I did have that conversation, and I believe, and keep me honest here, that what we discussed, I think, was new information for you, and it fundamentally addressed the question. And you suggested that I should go back and advise the board that you were satisfied with the response.
I'd still like to follow along with it. Should I get a copy of what you're reading somehow?
Sure. This is, could you pass that over to him? Thank you, Dan. This is a set of documents that talks about the warrant and what have you. Since our conversation, one of the things that became apparent, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you very shortly to hear what you have to say, is that it looks like if there are any changes to be made, that perhaps a warrant, a petitioned warrant article from the floor may be acceptable to make any such changes. And that was a bit of a surprise to me, because it was my impression that any changes that would have to be made may very well have to go before the state legislature to make the changes. There's a lot of history here. It has to do with the organizational meeting back in 1975 and what took place at that meeting and what was voted upon. And then there was additional information regarding the one-man, one-vote issue that actually seemed to prevail at that time.
Can I just say, the organizational meeting was 63, right?
Yeah,
And one man, one vote is 75.
Correct.
Yeah.
We were actually organized in 63, in May of 63 as a cooperative school district. Bob, at this point, I'd be happy to turn it over to you for further discussion.
I just wrote up a quick warrant article if I'm allowed to read that. Or would you rather have that? Because I know you asked me in your email to write something up.
I think if you want to do that sort of thing, the warrant article, there's a couple ways that we could go with this. If the board believes in the idea and wants to support it, then we could consider the warrant article to present before the electorate, if we want to do it as a board. The other option is, if we chose not to do that, that you could, as an individual, do by initiative, by petition, put forth the warrant article, again, at the deliberative session, which would then have to be voted on by the public at the March election. And then were it to pass, we would have to go through the changes that would be compliant with state law. It is my understanding that one of the options, in order to change that, would require us to come up with, analogously speaking, congressional districts meaning we would have to map out amongst the 7 towns the equivalent to a one-man, one-vote section for the 1/7 of the district that would equal to. We opted not to do that in 1975 at the meeting, and yet keep the individual districts to be represented at large by the vote of the entire district. So that's what's at issue here, if anybody has a question on this. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, couldn't you just, on the front of your, on your card there, on your name, it says Bridgewater. So do you just represent Bridgewater, or do you represent everybody?
I am the Bridgewater representative to the entire district, and I represent all the taxpayers, voters, and students that reside in the district.
Okay, so then why couldn't it be divided up by town?
That's a
Because
legal,
then your towns in front of you really don't.
well, let me attempt to address that
Yeah,
based
okay.
on my understanding of what the change is that you're requesting. For example, a smaller town, we'll take Groton, for example, it has a smaller population, would get 1 vote throughout the district, versus Bristol, which is a much larger town, would also get 1 vote throughout the district, if we were to do it the way you're proposing. The rectification of that is the choice to make each of the individual representatives, which was a choice considered at the time in 1975, to be elected at large amongst all, whatever the number of voters were at the time. There's approximately 7,500 registered voters throughout the district now. That's my interpretation. I am not an attorney, and if the board wants to expend district funds to evaluate what the ultimate choice may be here, we have a choice to do that. If Mr. Brooks wants to do that on his own and comply with state law, he has the choice to do that. He can present a warrant for our consideration in the January or so timeframe, such that we would consider placing the warrant on the agenda for the deliberative session and then having it voted upon in the March election. There are a number of choices here. The background information has been collected in part through efforts on the part of Lloyd Belbin, and has put together with Sue Cross's assistance at the SAU. And that's pretty much where it lies. We need to look through it and digest it and decide if we want to take any action on it. I think it would be inappropriate at this point to receive your warrant, although I'm sure we could if that's the inclination and desire of the board. So, Don?
Is the governing RSA in the folder? I didn't see it.
In the email from Barrett Christina, he does reference a couple of RSAs, and I'll just quote: "The current method of electing NASD board members fits in line with the current statute, RSA 195:19A, Section 4, which states, 'The members of the cooperative school board shall each be domiciled in and represent a pre-existing district, with each pre-existing district having at least one such resident representative, but all members of the cooperative school board shall be elected at large.'"
And can I just ask, Bob, what you really want is you want the town to be able to vote for its own representative and no one else to outvote them, right?
So, that makes it fair to each town, so then you get.
So,
But my reading of that RSA is there's 3 options. One, which Vinnie already, mentioned, was the whole district can vote for whoever wants to run. The second option was, he also mentioned, was each area would be like a representative, congressional representative district with equal number of voters in each of those districts. And then the third option is our current one, where each town can have one representative, but the whole district gets to vote to elect that individual from that town. And those are, my understanding,
candidates.
the only three options that the RSA allows for.
What page was that on?
Let's repeat the RSA number again.
It's RSA 195,
It's not in
colon
there.
19. So that's where we're at on this.
Well, I guess if you want to vote to see if you want to hear my warrant article.
Well, I encourage you to go ahead and share it with us.
You just said that I couldn't.
No, I'm suggesting it may not be appropriate to do right now in terms of asking us to present it for the next deliberative session. It's a little premature, but I'm suggesting.
You asked me to write something in your email and bring it tonight.
If you would like to share that with us, I'm suggesting that you go ahead and read that to us. Whether we take action on it or not remains to be seen. But I certainly would like you to share what you've done.
I'll wait till Marie Ross comes back.
She's right, I just
Okay.
didn't want to walk in front of the camera.
I'm all set.
You don't want to share it with us?
No, because I'm getting two different opinions.
Two different opinions?
Yeah,
From,
you.
explain to me.
Well, in your email, you said you wanted me to come and read something, and then you say you don't want me to. Is what I get out of it.
I'm sorry, I don't recall the specifics on that. What's the date of the email? Do you have it with you?
Right there.
This was,
Didn't you just say,
let me just read this out loud.
Okay.
Okay. Starting with item 1, you okay with that? Okay.
Yep.
It now appears election of the school board as we know it today was determined by vote of the district on its warrant, although RSA 671-8 was referenced in our conversation, and with further reference to RSA 669 included within 671. To me, and without further research on the topic and in my personal opinion only, it is entirely possible you may be able to seek the change you desire via a warrant article proposed to the district and not go about it via a more difficult and circuitous route that has been speculated, i.e. via change of law in the legislature, as I believe would be required. I know Dan has expressed his belief and that it would be difficult to do this in his email reply to you. Perhaps not. I like easy, even simplistic, in everything I'm involved in, and it seems at this point this could indeed be an option for you to consider. If the school board voted to do so, it could place a warrant before the voters. If not, you could petition for one with the proper procedures being followed to get it considered. I would advocate the latter and to be prepared with your justification and perhaps even a legal opinion of your own, using your own resources if you believe that necessary. However, with regard to Dan's promise about consulting with the district legal resources on this topic, I have asked him to put the brakes on that immediately, which brings me to item number 2. For the reasons cited above, the least expensive way for both the district and you to address this matter may be for you to draft a citizen's warrant and present it for consideration to all the voters in the prescribed manner for the next school district meeting. That way, when we have when we will have our attorney present at the meeting under our service agreement and for which we pay, its legal status could be addressed without the additional legal expense on the part of the district. If you believe it important enough to address upon advice of your own counsel in advance of the full meeting, you have that option. Is that enough, or should I continue?
Oh, that's good.
Okay. So I think that's what I've said.
Yeah.
If you want to go forward with it, you can certainly approach the board and ask us to consider it. I'm suggesting that at this point, it's a little bit premature because the deliberative session, when it would be presented and discussed, is many, many months away. That doesn't mean you can't present it this evening. It's possible that we could discuss it and decide to take action or not. Marie?
Was there a confusion when Mr. Migliore said the next school district meeting, that you assumed the next school board meeting?
Yeah.
Because I heard you read the next
thought-
district meeting. The district meeting is an annual meeting that takes place the first Saturday in February.
I see that. I apologize for the...
And when you said the next, I think you heard that as the
Yeah.
next school board
Yeah.
meeting, and hence the disconnect. And I just want to correct something
Yes.
you said, that it should be taken up in the January meeting. All petitioned warrant articles and school
a little
board
late.
are, the second Tuesday in January is the deadline. So with that clarification,
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking that's why, if I could just kind of hear both sides, that you were suggesting that you could present that closer to the time when the board would be voting on official
Okay.
warrants.
Well, I apologize too for any misunderstanding. too.
No, I can see that. Did I not say the next
You
school
said next district meeting.
Yeah.
meeting? Yeah, not the next school board meeting, but
Makes
it's,
sense, why you,
we had difference in precision at another meeting with a different board. Dan, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to offer one thought. With your talking of RSA changes and the legalities of any potential warrant article or change to the district's organization, you may want to consider that you may have a greater mountain to climb than RSA. The one-man, one-vote decision of the U.S. Supreme Court was a decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, so now you're talking about a federal change
Right.
that would be required to make any modification to the structure. Let me rephrase that. You'd have to change federal law to make certain changes to the structure acceptable.
I am not certain about that, to be honest with you, because we would still have each person having their own vote when it comes to articles on the warrant. But what he wants is for the people who are elected by the town to be only elected by the town.
Right, and in my opinion, having consulted legal counsel prior to being told to not, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
For the specific reason that Chairman Migliore said. If you have a small town with 100 residents, elect one vote, and a large town with 1,000 residents, elect one vote, you do not have any longer one man, one vote. So as he said, you could split the district into 7 districts, and just like congressional redistricting happens every 10 years, and Mr. Riley could talk us well on how challenging that is. You could split this district into 7 districts, but you would have to ensure that the same number of voters were in each district, and that would probably not happen along town lines.
oh no, I wouldn't.
Can I give you this back?
Certainly.
Have we covered it to your satisfaction thus far?
Yeah, but it's, yeah.
It's still
The
frustrating.
only confusing thing is that you have each town in front of you, even though everyone can.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think part of our initial conversation, just for the edification of those at home who may be listening as well, I think we could take this opportunity to clarify things in general. My experience has been that people who go to the polls on election day and see someone from another town on the ballot whom they do not know and from a different town fundamentally, they're not sure that they can vote for that person or not. They're not sure because they think it's exactly as you did, not a person from their town to represent them on the school board. They're not familiar with the detail, which is that we are all elected at large. Think of us as senators, if you will, for the district comprised of 7 towns, and that's how the election occurs. So as a result, people will often leave that candidate choice, and there are multiple candidates, blank, mostly in towns that the candidate is not from. If you look at the data tells us that the people that vote in a town for a candidate vote the most for either that sole candidate if they're running unopposed, or the highest number of votes that are cast are for the number of people that are running for that position in that town. But percentage-wise, the votes that are cast in other towns are much smaller for the other towns. And I personally believe it's because of that lack of knowledge of how this works, and that these cards, as you note, Bob, may very well be confusing people, making them think that I, in my case, as the representative for Bridgewater, have been voted by the town of Bridgewater to represent Bridgewater on the school board. That is not the case. Each of us represent the entire district. And when you vote, you're voting for us to represent the interests of, in our case, in the cooperative district, all 7 towns, to comply with the one-man, one-vote rule. So I thank you again for the opportunity to at least state that and explain it, primarily for the camera, for those at home, and also for those of us who are in the audience this evening. Do you have any further comment?
The only thing I would say is if any town doesn't meet the candidates night, like I did up in Hebron, that any of the voters make sure that they go to those, because we had Ruby and John and everyone else showed up and they were on first. So
Yes.
and that's why I explained when they were there. The reason that those people were there was because we can vote for them.
Yes, I do want to reiterate that again for those at home. If there's an opportunity to meet the candidates at any candidate night event, those who are running, assuming they can make the meeting, should certainly do so, because you get to introduce yourself to all of those individuals in a town outside of your own, which is the opportunity to do so and introduce yourself, let people get knowledgeable about where you may stand so that you can elicit or solicit their vote on election day. So, Sue.
And that would help with one of my explanations, too. Some people don't vote for people in the other towns because they don't feel they know enough about that person to vote for them. So they allow the people in that town, where the person comes from, to try to make that decision because they feel that they know this person, whoever's running, they know those people that are running better. And it seems that when the district was formed, originally, because the district hadn't been formed yet, each of the towns, I think, which were original districts, voted for their specific people to represent them. That was when it was first formed. But of course, once you formed the district, it would be different. I'm not seeing that here. I thought there was a warrant article in 1974, 75, that maybe clarified that a little bit further.
It is in here saying that you have to have a representative from each of the pre-existing districts. But it wouldn't matter since the Supreme Court made a decision that would have changed it anyway.
But 1975, there was a warrant article, and the resulting vote said all 7 members would be elected at large. So that's what changed it.
Yeah,
They would
essentially,
come from each town.
the choice
Yeah.
that Bob would like to revisit, and keep me honest here, it was made in 1975
Mhm.
to what we have today.
Right. Whether
That
you.
doesn't mean it can't be revisited much more easily than was the original impression that I had, which means to do so by warrant article, either sponsored by the board or by petition. I would caution you that if we were going to do it, we would certainly get a legal opinion to be put in place and understand what that requirement would be. I would advise you or your group, if you're in support of it, to get that as well, because the driving force behind that will be this one man, one vote issue.
And there has been talk in the past, too, about giving some of the larger towns more representatives, feeling that they should have more representation because they have more people there. I don't know if you could do anything like that, but I have a feeling that the smaller towns wouldn't vote that way because they would like to be equal to the larger towns in that way as far as the school board goes. So
They have more votes because of the one man, one vote rule.
percentage-wise, yes.
No, I mean on everything because it's a total vote.
No, I know that, but I mean, as far as what we vote on as a school board,
Oh,
each
here,
person
yes.
has one, each of us has one vote.
Yes.
Some represent less people in the
Right.
district.
No, you all
represent all the people in the district.
You're right. Come from less
Yeah,
people, there you go.
I
Yeah.
think that's what you
Yeah,
meant, was we
yeah.
come from smaller towns,
And we,
but
and,
we have to run against all 7,500 voters, not
Right.
against, but
you have to be.
for the vote of all 7,500
Yeah.
voters. Yes, Bob?
I just have one last thing to say. No matter how this turns out, I'll still be more than willing to do the Meet the Candidates night up in Hebron.
Yes, thank you. And one of the other things we spoke about, which I did encourage you to do specifically in the January timeframe, was as part of the initiative that we took this year to print what was on the warrant and send it out to all voters, that this issue is a topic that I believe needs to be further explained, as I've attempted to do this evening, and Bob has volunteered to assist with that effort in January, when the time comes. And again, I was careful to be very precise in terms, in the use of terms, but made the assumption that
Yeah, that's a problem.
school district meeting's different than school board, so, but I can understand how you interpreted that differently, so.
Okay.
Is there anything else to discuss on this evening? Thank you for attending, Bob, and bringing this up. Did you have a point, Jan?
If I can speak, I know it's not public comment, but when Bristol ran a candidates night and our group did that, we were talking about having separate ones for school board and for the individual towns, so that there would be more opportunity to meet the different candidates. And so I would love to be able to coordinate that with the district and maybe have it at a location that was, a district one for next year.
That sort of thing is, depending on your perspective and point of view, I've encountered both ways. Hey, school board's entirely separate, you guys do your own thing, you're the local political authority. It's not the correct term, but the essence is that by statute, we are a political subdivision. And we do things differently than with respect to the town. The town is a separate political entity as well. At times, for convenience, things are combined, and it's certainly not a bad thing to do. Okay, that being said, I would like to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is consolidation of committees. At our meeting with Barrett Christina, which I characterize as the Eat and Learn, because the superintendent was gracious enough to provide a very nice dinner for us at that learning session, which she has done traditionally for the past several years, and for which I thank her readily. We had the opportunity to discuss a number of things, and one of the things that came up in that session was the arrangement of the existing committee structure. And so I'd like to just summarize by saying that at that meeting, we had determined with Mr. Barrett's, Mr. Christina's guidance that we should probably have essentially 4 committees instead of the 6 or 7 or so that we currently have. And his suggestion was that we could certainly do the collective bargaining agreement committee as we had proposed, that we have the football field oversight committee as an organization, and I guess Peter's left us, but he'll probably be back. The policy committee certainly, which is a primary responsibility of the board, and the data task force. And the reason for that is that each of the actual committees of the board that are formed formally actually have to hold formally posted meetings. They have to provide an agenda, the minutes have to be taken, they have to follow the procedures of the school board, just like the school board meeting does, and present the minutes of those sessions to the full board. It seemed to me to be inconsistent with what I've seen in the past regarding the Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee. And so as a result, oh, and by the way, and comply with the right to know law, which is RSA 91A. It seemed to me that we were inconsistent in having those sessions. So the recommendation was to take the action to completely disband the Facilities Committee and offer that as an appointment that the superintendent would make and be responsible for both the oversight and management of it. And to do the same thing with the Finance Committee. We could have board members that could become liaison representatives to the Facilities Committee, which has been the case in the past, and so we could continue to achieve the same thing. Our business manager has in the past basically been the focal point for the facilities efforts and has the most knowledge of, and the superintendent's indicated to me that she would probably ask Dan in this case to chair that effort. So that's what we have thus far. And that's the proposal, is to consolidate to a contracts committee, a football field oversight, a policy committee, and a data task force. Comments from anyone? Do you have a question, Dan? No. Okay. There being no comment, we will go ahead and decide what to do when the time comes under action for that item. Next item on the agenda is student graduation requests. Exception to graduation protocol, the mortar boards. We had essentially two requests come up. One was from an individual who requested permission to wear his fireman's helmet in lieu of his mortarboard. And the second one was for an individual, and keep me honest here, Marie, to have, I believe it was her diploma presented by her veteran dad.
Father who's returned from the war.
Who has returned from overseas. So taking them up either separately or collectively, I would tell you the following. Regarding the individual who wanted to use his fireman's helmet, I took the time to meet with Nathan Mello personally and try to understand what his motivation was to see why it was he wanted to do that. And I can tell you that this young man exudes sincerity, and I was very impressed with his motivation. He told me that he wanted to show honor to his community and his fire department, which I interpreted as a real commitment to what it was he was interested in doing. He has a college focus and will be attending the Lakes Region Community College to deal with fire science. His motivation in doing this had to do with an experience in 1997 where I guess his house burned down when he was only a very small youngster. And so the request to wear his helmet to honor the fire department that he sincerely serves was created from that experience. His brother graduated from Plymouth and was allowed to do so in Plymouth. I actually made the effort to contact the school board chair in Plymouth, and we discussed the matter generally.